Hello everyone, welcome to Guild Wars 2. I'm finally back. My gear and computer shit is all set up. My guy has his black wings of clichéness, and first person has come out and it's pretty fucking awesome. Pardon my language. But anyway, we're gonna be talking today because Heart of Thorns is coming out soon. Theoretically soon. But they've already said they're not gonna up the armor. They're gonna keep the armor at what it is because they don't want people's old gear to go out. I don't know, they might change their mind. I don't know. I always thought it'd be cool for like a Mystic Forge thing where they put their armor into the Mystic Forge to make better armor. That way you have to get all the armor, if that makes sense. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. With Heart of Thorns coming out, I'm here to talk about the gear, and I'm gonna do a gear guide, and it's gonna be probably 2 or 3 videos. This one's for new level 80s or people with a new level 80. We're going to talk about how to get exotic gear today. All the ways, or the best ways to get it, the top 5 ways to get it, I would say. In another video, we'll talk about getting ascended gear, and then in another video, we'll talk about getting a legendary. Now, I don't have a legendary, I know how to get one, it's a pain in the ass, but I do have a full set of ascended gear, as well as I've had exotic gear. So we're going to start with these two. We're going to go over exotic gear today. So this is mainly for new level 80s, and existing level 80s looking for a new means to get gear. Now, exotic gear, this is going to be mainly for this is going to be a disclaimer for probably newer people. When you get to level 80, there's a lot of ways to get exotic gear. Don't worry about it. You can get it pretty fast as long as you know all the ways to get it. The main things you need to know as a new level 80 is what is your build and what stats does your build need. Which 3 stats does your build focus around? Once you pick the 3 stats you want your build to focus around, you can figure out which exotic gear you need to get, because all exotic gear has different stats. And certain ways of getting exotic gear don't exist, if that makes sense. So one way we're going to talk about to get exotic gear is Karma, but Karma doesn't give every type of exotic gear in existence. Say you're an Elementalist and you want Valkyrie gear. Valkyrie gear can't be obtained through Karma or other means. The only way you can get Valkyrie exotic gear is to craft it. So there's a lot of these that I'm going to show you that don't give you every type of exotic gear. I have this list up on the side here. It's a website that I'll put a link to in the description of the video where it has a whole chart of all the stats for exotic gear and how to get each one. But I'm not going to go over that in this video. But we're going to go into it. And the other disclaimer I'll say, this is again for newer level 80s. You might see it. It's not as bad as it used to be, but it's still kind of bad. There's sometimes a Berserker's fetish, where everyone says, oh, you have to have Berserker's gear or you're garbage, or something along that lines. It doesn't happen as much now as it used to, but some people still seem to have that mindset. Ignore it. A lot of times Berserker's groups get fucked because what happens is a lot of newer people feel pressured into getting Berserker's gear, and because they never take the time to learn the dungeons or learn how to effectively do their build, they get killed all the time. And that's not their fault because they're new and they don't know what they're doing. That's the pressure of having a Berserker armor set, and it makes you really squishy. And until you know how to effectively dodge and heal and what to do, it's going to happen. So, start with a more survivable set of gear, I guess. Like what I did when I started, I got a full set of Soldier's gear. And even now, I still don't use full Berserker's gear on this guy. I use some Berserker's gear, some Soldier's gear, mostly Soldier's gear still, honestly, because I do plenty of damage now. My Mesmer has full Berserker's gear, as does my Elementalist, but, I find I like to be a bit more survivable. So don't worry about the Berserker's fetish. The other thing to remember is you don't need a full set of gear to be the same stats. I mean, I have Berserker's gear down here, Soldier's gear up here, Soldier's gear up here, Berserker's gear here. So you can mix and match armor pieces to do whatever it is you want it to do. So don't be so focused on that. But anyway, that's my disclaimer for new level 80s. Let's get right into it here. So the first thing we're going to talk about in our list of 5 exotic gears is flat out buying them. And I don't recommend this for new people. And it may be more effective if you have a lot of gold, or maybe if you have an existing level 80 to make you gold. But all you gotta do, you can do it one of 2 ways. You can either look for satchels of gear, not Sapphajul, satchel. Make sure it's exotic. And you can hover over it and it'll say right there, double click to unpack a full set of level 80 armor. Now these can get pretty expensive. Um, you can also look up the pieces individually. Say you want, I'm not going to do Berserker's gear, but say you want Assassin's gear. So you type in Assassins, you make sure this is set to 80, and it'll pull up all the gear that is Assassins oriented. You can search it, you can filter it a little more, but this is one way to get gear, is to just flat out buy it with gold. This is one of the only two ways to get any type of gear, if that makes sense. Meaning, if you want kind of an oddball piece of gear, you can get it through the auction house. So the auction house, it costs a lot of gold. That's a downfall. It's not the first thing you should turn to, but if you need a very specific type of gear, it's one of the only two ways to usually get the more unique types of exotic gear. So putting that off to the back burner, the second way we're going to talk about is the Eternal Battlegrounds in World vs. World. If you do a lot of World vs. World, this is nice because it's a lot cheaper than the auction house is. All you have to do is load into the Eternal Battlegrounds and run off over to here. And over here there's an armorsmith and a weaponsmith. And they have gear, and they don't have all the gear. They have certain types of gear which is listed here, and you can obviously go into it and look at the stats. But it does cost quite a few badges of honor for each piece, but the gold cost is ridiculously lower. So if you've done a lot of World vs. World, I highly recommend getting most of your gear here if it's applicable to you. That's all there is to the World vs. World gear. It's nice and easy. The next one we're going to talk about, number 3, not that there's any real order to this, but the third way to get gear is through dungeons. So for those of you, most people don't accept lower level people into dungeons unless you've had experience. So this may not be as easily applicable to most new level 80s. But if you've done a lot of dungeons on a different character or on this character, you know that you get a lot of dungeon tokens for doing the explorable path. You get about 60 per each run. If you do one explorable path a day, you get 60 tokens. Or for each, how do I word that? For each explorable path in a dungeon, you can get 60 tokens once a day. Every other time you run it, you get less. So usually it's most effective to run the 3 paths, get your 60 tokens, and save them up. Each dungeon does have different tokens, if you didn't know that. So like in here, you have Ascalonian Catacombs, uses Ascalonian Tears. Citadel of Flame uses Flame Legion char carvings. All different ones. But what you do is you go to the poster and reward waypoint, which you just saw me load into, and you come down to this area. And there's a different vendor for each dungeon, so obviously this guy's Citadel of Flame. What you do is you talk to them. You can either ask for weapons or armor. If you ask for armor, you just have to make sure you go to the second pouch, and there's all your gear. Light, medium, heavy. And it's the same thing with weapons. You go in, and you have all your weapons. Now, each dungeon has specific stats on their exotic gear. For example, what is this called? Citadel of Flame has Berserkers, which is a Berserkers. They have power, vitality, condition damage, and they have power, precision, condition damage. So if you're going to do dungeons to get your exotic gear, make sure you're running a dungeon that has the gear that you need, that particular stats. When I was getting my power, toughness, vitality gear, my soldier's gear, I ran Honor of the Waves and Ascalonian Catacombs because they had both of those, or they both had power, toughness, vitality gear. So make sure, if you're going to do it through dungeons, that you have the right stat, that the dungeon has the right stats for you. So that's number 3. Number 4 we'll talk about since we're right here. It is crafting. Crafting is the other one besides the auction house that can get you almost any piece of exotic gear you want. So we're just going to go over to this crafting area. You're going to need your tailoring to be 400, and you're probably going to need to discover the recipes. I'm not going to go into a full crafting build on here, how to craft. But look it up, learn how to craft. And you can make all sorts of different... I have a bunch of shoulders unlocked. But basically, you just need the correct insignia, and you need the correct 2 pieces of gossamer. Or whichever, if you're doing heavy armor, it's going to be the armor smithing. But just make sure you have the right insignia and the right pieces, and you can make a full set of gear. For usually relatively cheaper than just buying it outright. But you do need to spend the money to get your crafting to 400. So, that's number 4. The last one we're going to talk about is, in fact, Karma Merchants. Now, a lot of people who first play this game if this is a new level 80, you probably, if you didn't level them through World versus World, you leveled them by doing a shitload of quests and getting a shitload of karma. Now, if you're a good newbie and you save that karma, you can go to these temples in Ore, which have these blue symbols. I think there's 5 of them spread around you. You got one there, one down there, one over there. You have one right there and one down, 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 down. Here, you go to them, and as long as they're not captured, as long as you have control over them, you go up to the karma guy, you talk to him, and he's going to have sets of gear. Now again, there's only certain sets of gear, and each set of gear is specific to a temple. So if you need a specific set of gear, you need to make sure you go to the right temple. And it costs 42,000 gear for each piece, 42,000 karma for each piece. So you're going to need a good chunk of karma, but if you saved up all your karma, you should be able to get most of it fairly easy. So that's basically where how to get your armor. We're going to talk about one other thing, and we're going to go back to Lion's Arch for it, and that's upgrading your exotic armor. So the first step is getting your exotic armor, and you'll probably have your exotic armor for a very long time, unless you switch it out. Ascended gear takes quite a while, and most people don't have the patience to do it, so you'll probably end up with your exotic gear for a very long time. So you need to know how to upgrade yourself further. How can you do even more damage, or survivability, or whatever? And I'm going to talk about this in each of the gear guide videos, but there's a couple things you should do once you have enough gold and you have your gear. First thing you should do is figure out which upgrades to my gear do I need. So for example, I use the Rune of the Eagle on my armor. So if you go into the auction house, what you can do is you can go to upgrade components, and each upgrade component exists separately. Don't worry about infusions right now. But so there's runes for armor, there's sigils for weapons, there's also just kind of standard other ones. So there's 2 ways to really upgrade your weapons. You can either give your weapons a flat bonus, like my staff has an opal orb that you can see right there, that basically, or like my warhorn has Crest of the Soldier. Those are just basically flat increases to the damage that it already gets. So all you got to do there is go in. If you say, alright, I want more power, precision, and ferocity, let me just look up, what is it? Something, like if you look up orb, you can pretty much pull up most of them. If you look up orb, see, these give you a lot of flat bonuses. The other alternative is to actually use sigils and runes. And sigils and runes usually have much more unique abilities. And they, generally speaking, they give you more for swapping out a lot. So you have Sigils of Accuracy, which give you 7% crit chance. You have Sigils of Blood, which give you 50% chance to steal. So these are more special abilities. A lot of them involve swapping weapons. So say Sigil of Battle, gain 2 stacks of might when you swap to this weapon while in combat. This is a very popular one for Elementalists who switch attunements a lot. But so yeah, this is good to... you want to upgrade your weapon eventually. You also want to upgrade your armor with runes. Now, runes work similarly to sigils. You can, what it is for every piece of armor that has the same rune in it, you get extra points. So say the Superior Rune of Divinity we have here, the first piece will give you 8 to all stats. The second piece will give you 10 to all stats, the third piece will give you 12, all the way down to the end. And you have runes that can do everything. I'm not going to go into detail on which runes do what, but look into your build, figure out what you want it to do more. Figure out the price, because some of these runes can get really expensive. I know that the Rune of Strength is 10 gold a pop, so 60 gold, or 66 gold because of the almost 11 gold there. Probably might not be worth it, but if you scroll down some, there's usually cheaper runes that work pretty well. After you do that, the one other thing you can do is you can go to... I don't remember what it's under here. I think it's under yeah, food effects and utility effects. So you want to look up food effects, and you want to buy ones that help you out. You can also do utility effects. So if I go to my inventory, I have my utility is quality maintenance oil, and my food is bowls of butternut squash soup. Both of them give me, one gives me 60 ferocity and 80 precision. The other gives me precision equal to 5% of my toughness and equal to 3% of my vitality. So obviously my food is focused on precision. But this can give you a massive increase. I'll even show it off now. Right now, my crit chance, which is what precision affects, is only 31.3, If I eat 2 of these, it goes up to 41.0. So there's a significant jump by using food and utility. So if you have the gold, it's recommended you do that. It's recommended you get runes and sigils for your gear. And I think that's pretty much it, honestly. I think I've covered everything I wanted to in this video. So, you know, take what I've said, get your exotic gear. Obviously, there's exotic gear for everything, even except for, I think, the mask there's not an exotic version for. But aquatic weapons, your accessories can be exotic. What I'm going to do is, on my other screen here, I have a full list of all the exotic gear, meaning by stat. So if there's a certain stat you're looking for, you can go to this website, you can look up the stats, it'll tell you the name of the gear, the like general name that's used, and it will tell you how you can acquire it. So if you're looking for a certain type of gear, it'll say, alright, you can acquire this through Karma, you can acquire this through World vs. World, you can acquire it through dungeons, or it'll say you can't do it this way. But this list, I'll put the link in the video description. You can go to it and see which gear you need for what. But that's going to be it for this video. I don't think I left anything out. If you have any questions I didn't answer, let me know. And I will see you guys when I do the Ascended Guide next time.